What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, a Blockbuster_ guy on Twitter, and since John Jones has decided that he's actually going to take a fight that was given to him, we're actually going to have a UFC coming up. UFC 152 takes place Saturday, September 22nd, and here come the fight picks. We're going to start on the undercard. At the welterweight division, we have Kyle Noke taking on Charlie Brenneman. Kyle Noke, 19-6-1 on his pro career, has a winning record of 3-2 in the UFC. Currently riding a 2-loss streak to Ed Herman and Andrew Craig. He's finished 14 of his 19 pro wins, got 6 by knockout, 8 submissions, but when the fight goes to a decision, he only has an even record of 3 wins and 3 losses. Charlie Brenneman, 15-4 in his pro career, 4-3 in the UFC, so he also has a winning record, a little bit more octagon experience than Kyle Noke. He was submitted by Eric Silva in his last fight. I actually really like Charlie Brenneman's style. He's a freestyle wrestler. Yeah, more than half of his wins have come by way of decision, but I actually think he has a kind of an exciting style. Fun to watch, at least. But in all 3 of his UFC losses, he has been finished, which you'd think would play right into Kyle Noke's hand. I am going to take Kyle Noke in this fight. I'm giving him the experience edge. He's got more fights under his belt, even though Charlie Brenneman has a couple more fights inside the octagon. I'm going to give the edge here to Kyle Noke, but I'm going to give it to him by way of decision. I don't think he finishes Charlie Brenneman, but I am going to give him the edge to win the fight by decision. At the bantamweight division, we have Mitch Gagnon, Canadian, taking on, I believe it's pronounced Wallel Watson. You can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but for these purposes, I'm going to be calling him Wallel. Mitch Gagnon, 8-2 on his pro career. He lost his octagon debut, being submitted by Brian Caraway. He's a grappler. All 8 of his pro wins have come by way of submission, and the majority of those, I think all but maybe 1, have all been chokes. So he definitely likes to go for the choke, go for the neck, and get the finish that way. This is Mitch Gagnon's second fight at 135. He had been fighting previously at 145 at featherweight. So his second fight coming down to 135. Wallel Watson, 9-4 on his pro career. He is 1-2 in the UFC. Currently riding a 2-loss streak to Yves Jabouin and TJ Dillashaw. Both of those were by way of decision. All 9 of his pro wins have been finishes. He's got 7 submissions, also chokes. So these are 2 guys that if this fight hits the ground, they're both going to be looking for each other's necks, which I think is going to translate to very interesting and entertaining ground fighting. I'm going to have to give the edge here to Wallel Watson. I like Mitch Gagnon. Mitch Gagnon's Canadian. I like to get behind Canadian fighters. Wallel Watson has the experience edge. He has the octagon edge. He's got a little more power in his hands than Mitch Gagnon has, so even if the fight stays standing, I have to give Watson at least the power advantage there. I actually think Wallel Watson is going to submit Mitch Gagnon. I think you're going to have a fight that's going to hit the ground very early, hit the ground multiple times, both these guys looking for their necks, and I just think Wallel Watson is going to be the one that finds it. Wallel Watson, second round submission. Back up to the welterweight division, Seth Bashinsky taking on Simeon Thoresen. There's some hard to pronounce names on this card. Seth Bashinsky, 16-6 on his pro career, 3-1 inside the octagon. Currently riding a 5-fight win streak is Bashinsky. He's a grappler with some knockout power. 10 of his 16 pro wins have come by way of submission, but he's also got 5 knockouts. So he's a grappler, but he's definitely got some power in his hands. Trains with Ryan Bader, so his wrestling, and trains with that camp. So his wrestling, you got to imagine, is probably pretty on par, even though he's sort of got the track record here of a finisher. Simeon Thoresen, 17-2-1 on his pro career. Very impressive record. Won his UFC debut by subbing, I don't have it written down. I think it was Youssef. I can't remember his first name, but I think it was Youssef that he subbed in his debut. But aside from that, he's also currently riding a 3-fight win streak, including that submission of Youssef. Trained by Hellboy Hansen. If you've never seen Joaquin Hellboy Hansen, Go on YouTube and see some of Hellboy Hansen's fights. This guy is a grappling machine. So Thorison's grappling pedigree is right there, and 15 of his 17 pro wins have come by way of submission, and I'm going to give him another one. Simeon Thorison, third round submission to submit Seth Bashinsky, break that 5-win streak, continue his win streak, and move up the welterweight rankings. In the featherweight division, we have Jimmy Hedges. Again, another name I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing wrong. Jimmy Hedges taking on Marcus Brimage. Jimmy Hedges, an undefeated 10-0 as a professional fighter, has won both of his UFC fights by submitting Alex Caceres and decisioning Nam Phan. He's got 9 wins by submission. He's a judo brown belt. He's a BJJ purple belt. This guy is grappling all day. 9 submission wins out of 10 fights. Jimmy Hedges is showing to be a force to be reckoned with in this division, and this isn't just another opportunity to display that against a very game opponent, Marcus Brimage. Marcus Brimage 5-1 on his pro career, so he's only got 6 pro fights. He's 2-0 in the UFC as well as his Hedges, currently riding a 3-fight win streak. 2 of those wins, 2 straight decisions. He's got UFC wins over Stephen Bass and Maximo. He was the one to beat Maximo Blanco. And both of these guys, what I love about this fight, both of these guys are southpaws. So usually when you have one southpaw in a fight, it can be like, oh, stylistically it's going to be a problem. Both of these guys are southpaws, which I think is going to make very interesting. Kind of negates the advantage on both sides. I can't bet against the guy that's unbeaten. I gotta go Jimmy Hedges in this fight. I think Hedges will take it by unanimous judges' decision. Brimage is going to want to do everything that he can to keep this fight standing. Overall, Jimmy Hedges is just going to be too much for him, so I'm going to take Hedges by unanimous judges' decision. At welterweight, we have Sean Pearson taking on Lance Benoist. Sean Pearson, 12-6 on his pro career, 2-2 inside the octagon. He decisioned Hecht last, I believe, was his last fight. He's 36 years old. He's been fighting since 1999. This is a guy that has a wealth of experience inside and outside of the octagon. And both of his UFC wins have come by way of decision, so he's kind of the prototypical UFC fighter. Ha! Lance Benoist, 6-1 on his pro career, has an even record of 1-1 in the UFC, was decisioned by Seth Bashinsky in his last fight. Benoist is only 24 years old. So you have a 24-year-old against a 36-year-old, old school versus new school, if you want to call it that. He's primarily a He's primarily a grapper, yeah. Primarily a grappler, with 4 of his 6 pro wins coming by way of submission. I really wanted to go with Lance Benoist in this fight. I think Benoist has a lot of potential and a lot of talent. Call it a gut feeling, but I think I got to go with the quote-unquote the old dog, and give this one to Sean Pearson. Again, call it a gut feeling if you have to. I got a good feeling about Sean Pearson, and I've said before and I'll say again, the most powerful tool that I have in this fight pick game is the most prodigious gut. So I think I'm going to have to go with Sean Pearson. I'm going to give him the edge by way of unanimous judges' decision to beat Lance Benoist. At lightweight, we have TJ Grant taking on Evan Dunham in what I think is going to have Fight of the Night written all over it. TJ Grant, 18-5 in his pro career, a winning record of 5-3 inside the octagon. Currently riding a 2-fight win streak over Carlo Prater and Shane Roller. He is unbeaten at this weight class. Has never been beaten at lightweight. 13 of his 18 pro wins have come by way of submission, but 4 of his 5 career losses have come by way of decision. So if the fight goes to the judges, that's something to watch out for. Evan Dunham, 13-2 on his pro career, 6-2 in the UFC, an excellent UFC record for 8 fights. Currently also riding a 2-fight win streak over Nick Lentz and Shamar Bailey. 9 of his 13 pro wins have come by way of submission. He is a southpaw, trains at Extreme Couture, so his boxing, dirty boxing, everything like that, definitely on point. TJ Grant is another fighter that I don't like to bet against because I really like his fight style, but I got to give the advantage here to Evan Dunham. I think Evan Dunham is going to take this thing into deep waters. TJ Grant's not going to have an answer for him. Evan Dunham technical knockout, or knockout in the third round. The final fight of the undercard takes place in the light heavyweight division. Igor Pokraich taking on Vinny Magalhaes. Pokraich on his career, 25-8. He's 4-3 in the UFC. Currently riding a 3-fight win streak over Fabio Maldonado, Krzysztof Shoshinsky, and Matt Brown. He has finished he's finished 3 of his 4 UFC wins, so only 1 has come by way of decision, but he's been decisioned in 2 of his 3 losses. So decisions not being overly kind to Igor Pokraich. Vinny Magalhaes, very excited to have Vinny Magalhaes back inside the octagon. 9-5-1 on his pro career. He lost his only 2 UFC fights. This is his second stint in the UFC. Currently riding a 5-fight win streak outside of the UFC, primarily in M1 Global, where he was the M1 light heavyweight champion. He is a second-degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt with under Holler Gracie. It's under one of the Gracies, and I believe it's Holler. Magalhaes' grappling is really on point. I like Pokraich. I can't not give this fight to Vinny Magalhaes. Vinny Magalhaes' grappling, I believe, is going to be the difference here. I'm going to give him the win by second round submission. This is going to move us up onto the main card. Featherweight fight. Cub Swanson taking on Charles Oliveira in another fight that could possibly have Fight of the Night written all over it. Cub Swanson, 17-5 on his pro career, 2-1 in the UFC, currently riding a 2-fight win streak over Sean Pearson and George Roop, and both of those fights he won by technical knockout. Charles Oliveira, 16-2-1 on his pro career. He is 4-2-1 inside the octagon. So more octagon experience for Charles Oliveira than has Cub Swanson. Also riding a 2-fight win streak over Jonathan Brookins, and I can't remember his first name, but it was Wisely. Wisely was his other win, and both of those were by submission. So you have Swanson, who's won his last 2 by TKO, Oliveira, who's won his last 2 by way of submission. 15 of Oliveira's 16 pro wins have come by way of finishes, and he's been finished in both of his losses. The numbers here tell me to go with Charles Oliveira. I'm in an underdog-taken mood here. I'm going to take Cub Swanson. I really like his fight. I like his fight style. I just like Cub Swanson. So I'm probably going against my better judgment here, but I'm going to take Cub Swanson. Third round knockout or technical knockout to keep the TKO train going. Cub Swanson, third round knockout or TKO. In the light heavyweight division, we have Matt Hamill taking on late replacement Vladimir Matyushenko. I only mention that Matyushenko is a late replacement because originally this was supposed to be Matt Hamill taking on Roger the Hulk Hollett, who is a Nova Scotian fighter. I was really excited to see that fight. Roger had to pull out with an injury. I can't remember what the injury was, but he was replaced by Vladimir Matyushenko. Matt Hamill, 10-4 on his pro career, of course coming out of retirement to take this fight. 9-4 inside the octagon, has only ever had 1 pro fight outside of the UFC. Currently riding a 2-loss streak to Alexander Gustafsson and Rampage Jackson. So no disrespect in losing either one of those fights, because Gustafsson, who Tommy Toehold likes to call Swedish Chef, is really tearing up the division right now. For a guy that's got 6 of his 10 pro wins by knockout, he has no finishes, this is Hamill, no finishes since 2009, and 2 of his 4 losses have come by way of knockout. So he's maybe showing that his chin is a little bit susceptible, which is a dangerous thing against a guy like Vladimir Matyushenko. Matyushenko, 26-6 on his pro career, 7-4 inside the UFC, so a respectable octagon record. He was knocked out by Alexander Gustafsson in his last fight. Most of Matyushenko's wins come by way of decision, but he's been knocked out in 4 of his 6 losses. This is a fight where there's going to be a good knockout comes out of this fight. I'm pretty confident about it looking at the numbers now. Based on the fact that Hamill came out of retirement for this fight, you gotta wonder how much of his heart's really in it. My head's gotta take Matyushenko in this fight. I think Matyushenko will win the fight by second round knockout or TKO. In the middleweight division, we have the Count Michael Bisping taking on the All-American Brian Stann. Michael Bisping, 22-4 on his pro career, 12-4 in the UFC. He was an unbeaten 10-0 when he first came to the UFC. Was decisioned in his last fight, of course, by Chael P. Sonnen. The thing about Bisping, and this is the reason that I really don't like Bisping, is like for all of his wins, he has very few that are remarkable, really, in any way. His two sort of career-defining wins were Matt Hamill and Yoshihiro Akiyama, and, you know, Bisping is given a ton of credit. He's always talked about as like, oh, he's a solid contender in the middleweight division. I don't see how he is. I don't know. For whatever reason, I don't buy into it. Brian Stann, 12-4 on his pro career. He is 6-3 in the UFC. Knocked out Alessio Sakara in his last fight. His last 3 wins have all been by way of knockout, and 9 of his 12 wins overall have been by knockout. Of course, black belt in Marine Corps fighting, which really only about 1/3 of it translates to cage fighting, because you can't fight with knives and you can't fight with guns. But Brian Stann, I like Brian Stann. I was happy to see him get the win over Sakara, and probably based entirely on my dislike for Michael Bisping, I'm going with Brian Stann in this fight. Again, the sort of quote-unquote underdog train continues. I think Stan is going to go out there like a house on fire, and I think he's going to take Bisping's head off. So I'm taking Brian Stann by round 1 knockout or technical knockout, probably again going against my better judgment, but there it is. Co-main event time. Flyweight title. Joseph Benavidez taking on Demetrious Johnson to crown the first ever UFC flyweight champion. Joseph Benavidez, 16-2 on his pro career, unbeaten 3-0 in the UFC, currently riding a 4-fight win streak over Arushitani, Wineland, Loveland, and Fabiano. Team Alpha Male is all I really have to tell you about Joseph Benavidez. He looks for the patented Team Alpha Male guillotine choke, and that's what pretty well all of his submission victories have come by, is that patented Team Alpha Male guillotine choke. Demetrious Johnson, 15-2-1 on his pro career for Mighty Mouse. 3-1-1 in the UFC, so a little more octagon experience for him. Decision to Ian McCall in his last fight. Has 6 wins and 2 losses by way of decision. He's a grappler. He's got some knockout power. When I look at this fight, I can't not go with Benavidez. It feels like Benavidez is the one that's got all the momentum. Remember, Demetrious Johnson had to beat Ian McCall twice to get here because of the judging controversy in the first fight. Benavidez, to me, is going to be the fresher fighter. I think he's the more skilled fighter. I like Mighty Mouse. Got to go with Joseph Benavidez to become the first ever UFC flyweight champion by way of 5-round unanimous judges' decision. And that takes us to the main event of the evening. John Chicken Bones Jones taking on the legendary Vitor the Phenom Belfort in a 5-round fight for the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. John Jones, 16-1 on his pro career, 10-1 in the UFC. Of course, the only loss came by disqualification. This is John Jones's 4th title defense. 13 of his 16 pro wins have been finishes. He's got 8 knockouts and 5 submissions. You know, John Jones, he's one of the best in the world. I might not like him on a personal level based on some of the shit that he's done lately. Everyone seems to use the excuse, oh, well, you know, he's only young, but to me that's not an excuse when you're disciplined enough to be a professional fighter. But anyways, John Jones, we all know the book on John Jones. Very dynamic striker. Tosses in a lot of elbows, a lot of knees. Just a huge reach. He's a very, very, very dynamic fighter. Look at Vitor Belfort, 21-9 on his pro career, 10-5 inside the UFC. Currently riding a 2-fight win streak against Rumble Johnson and Yoshihiro Akiyama. And his only loss since 2007 was that highlight reel front kick knockout loss to Anderson Silva. That is his only loss since 2007. Oh, does my heart ever want to say Vitor's going to win this fight. It really does. This, to me, is the same story as, like, Rocky Balboa taking on Mason the Line Dixon in the most recent Rocky movie. You got the old dog who's basically like holding on to a puncher's chance, and I think at some point in this fight, Vitor's hands are so goddamn fast, he's gonna catch Jon Jones once or twice in this fight. He might even knock Jon Jones down. But that does not, to me, translate to winning this fight. I think Jon Jones is going to employ an oh-so-masterful Jackson fighting game plan to take Belfort into the latter rounds, round 4, round 5. I think he's going to finish him off in round 4. Jon Jones, technical knockout victory in the 4th round. Those are my predictions for UFC 152. I'm going to go over them here with you one more time. At welterweight, I've got Kyle Noke decisioning Charlie Brenneman. At bantamweight, I have Wallel Watson submitting Mitch Gagnon in the 2nd round. At welterweight, I have Simeon Thoresen submitting Seth Bashinsky in the 3rd round. At featherweight, I have Jimmy Hedges decisioning Marcus Brimage. At welterweight, I have Sean Pearson decisioning Lance Benoist. At lightweight, I have Evan Dunham TKOing TJ Grant in the 3rd round. And at light heavyweight, I have Vinny Magalesh submitting Igor Pokrajic in the 2nd round. Moving on to the main card, I have Cub Swanson knocking out or TKOing Charles Oliveira in the 3rd round. At light heavyweight, I have Vladimir Matyushenko knocking out Matt Hamill in the 2nd round. At middleweight, I have Brian Stann with a knockout or TKO victory over Michael Bisping in the 1st round. For the flyweight title, I have Joseph Benavidez winning a 5-round unanimous decision victory over Demetrius Johnson. And in the main event, light heavyweight title, I have Jon Jones knocking out or TKOing Vitor Belfort in the 4th round. Those are my predictions. Hit me with your predictions in the comments section below. Once again, fuck Jon Jones and Greg Jackson for not taking the fight with Chael Sonnen, but looks like we're going to get a good pay-per-view out of it anyway. Let me know what you think about UFC 152. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter. Keep your eyes out for the 2nd episode of my weekly NFL Pick Show, which is going to come up later today.